You are 200,000 miles from Earth. The temperature inside your spacecraft has dropped low enough that ice is forming on the inside of the windows, and you haven't had a real drink of water in almost 2 days. Behind you, the main part of your ship, the part with working power, working heat, and a working bathroom, is dead. You're crammed into a tiny lunar lander built to support 2 people for 2 days, except there are 3 of you, and you need it to last 4. The oxygen scrubbers meant to keep your air breathable weren't designed for this many people. And if your crew can't rig a fix using nothing but plastic bags, cardboard, and duct tape, carbon dioxide will slowly build up in the cabin until it kills all 3 of you long before you ever get home. April 1970. You are an astronaut on Apollo 13, and 56 hours ago, an oxygen tank exploded and turned a routine trip to the moon into a genuine fight to survive the trip back. You spent years training to walk on the lunar surface. Nobody trained you for this. Freezing, dehydrated, sleep-deprived, doing math by hand, because your computer's power is rationed down to almost nothing, with the entire world watching and no guarantee you'll make it home alive. This is your life as an Apollo 13 astronaut, one of history's most famous, successful failures, and one whose real experience was considerably more miserable and more genuinely terrifying than the highlight reel remembered. Long before the accident that would define this mission, simply becoming an astronaut in this era meant accepting a level of risk that later generations of space travelers would never have to face in quite the same way. NASA's astronaut selection process during this period was famously demanding, drawing heavily from military test pilots, a career already statistically dangerous on its own. Given the experimental aircraft and high-risk flight, testing many candidates had already survived before NASA ever selected them. Training involved grueling physical conditioning, extensive technical education in engineering and geology, and repeated exposure to genuinely uncomfortable and disorienting simulations, including centrifuge training that subjected your body to intense G-forces and underwater training designed to simulate weightlessness for hours at a time. Here's a detail that reframes how dangerous this entire program already was before Apollo 13's specific crisis. In January 1967, 3 astronauts died in a flash fire during a ground test for Apollo 1, trapped inside a capsule with a hatch that couldn't be opened quickly enough from the inside. This wasn't a distant historical footnote to you. This was recent, deeply felt institutional trauma within NASA, and every astronaut who flew after that disaster, including you, did so fully aware that spaceflight in this era carried a real, demonstrated chance of dying before you ever left the launch pad, let alone made it home from space. Physically, the toll of spaceflight itself was considerably harder on your body than popular imagination tends to acknowledge. Extended time in microgravity caused genuine, documented physiological changes, fluid shifts toward your upper body and head, muscle and bone density loss, and disorientation that could take real time to adjust to, both entering and leaving weightlessness. Biomedical sensors were attached directly to your skin for the duration of the mission, monitoring your heart rate and other vital signs continuously, which meant a genuine, persistent physical discomfort layered on top of every other challenge you faced for the entire length of the mission. And even before anything went wrong with Apollo 13 specifically, the sheer mechanical complexity of the mission carried enormous inherent risk. The spacecraft contained hundreds of thousands of individual components, any one of which could theoretically fail catastrophically, and the entire mission depended on nearly flawless execution of an enormously complicated sequence of engine burns, separations, and course corrections, performed hundreds of thousands of miles from any possibility of physical rescue if something went seriously wrong. On April 13, 1970, roughly 56 hours into the mission, a stirring fan inside one of your spacecraft's oxygen tanks, damaged months earlier during ground testing in a way nobody caught before launch, ignited insulation inside the tank, causing it to rupture. The explosion damaged a second oxygen tank as well, and within minutes, your spacecraft was venting oxygen into space and losing electrical power generated by fuel cells that depended on that oxygen to function. The phrase that would become famous, "Houston, we've had a problem," genuinely understated the scale of what had just happened. Your main spacecraft, the command module, was rapidly losing the power, oxygen, and water it needed to keep you alive, and mission control on the ground needed to figure out, in real time, whether you and your crew were about to become the first astronauts to die in deep space with absolutely no way for anyone to reach you. The solution mission control and your crew arrived at was to use the Lunar module, the separate spacecraft designed specifically to land 2 astronauts on the moon's surface, as a lifeboat for the journey home, despite the fact that it was never designed to support 3 people and was only rated to sustain 2 people for roughly 2 days of surface operations, not the 4 additional days your crew now needed it to provide life support for the entire trip back to Earth. Here's a detail that captures just how serious your air supply situation became. The Lunar module's carbon dioxide scrubbers used a different shaped filter cartridge than the ones stored in the damaged command module, meaning the extra, compatible filters you actually had on board physically wouldn't fit the equipment you needed them to work with. Engineers on the ground, working with only the same materials your crew had physically available on the spacecraft, designed an improvised adapter using plastic bags, cardboard from a procedure manual, and duct tape, talking your crew through building it by hand in real time, because a slowly rising carbon dioxide level inside your tiny shared cabin represented a genuine, gradual poisoning risk if it wasn't solved. Power conservation became a genuinely brutal, ongoing challenge for the remainder of the mission. To preserve enough electrical power for reentry, your crew shut down nearly all non-essential systems, including heating, which caused the interior temperature of your spacecraft to drop to a level historical accounts describe as roughly comparable to a refrigerator, cold enough that condensation formed on interior surfaces and equipment, creating a genuine additional risk of electrical short circuits at the exact moment you could least afford any additional system failures. With water reserves severely rationed specifically to preserve enough for re-entry cooling systems, your crew significantly reduced water intake for the remainder of the mission. Historical accounts describe total consumption dropping to a small fraction of normal daily requirements, resulting in genuine, measurable dehydration by the time you eventually return to Earth. One crew member reportedly lost a significant amount of body weight over the course of the mission, a direct physical consequence of both restricted water intake and the general physical strain of the crisis. Sleep, unsurprisingly, became almost impossible to manage properly. The extreme cold made resting difficult on its own, and the ongoing technical crisis required frequent, disruptive communication with mission control at all hours, as engineers on the ground worked around the clock developing and relaying new procedures your crew needed to perform, often with very little advance notice or time to properly rest between critical tasks. Navigation itself became a genuinely nerve-wracking manual challenge, with the spacecraft's primary guidance computer largely powered down to conserve energy. Your crew and mission control needed to perform crucial course correction burns using considerably more manual methods, including using the Sun and Earth as visual reference points through a spacecraft window to help verify your ship's orientation before firing engines.